We were able to attract talented, creative people, especially with the music. We were able to show them what we had, and it looked good. So we got Charles Bernstein, who was a rising, up-and-coming master.
He showed me the picture, and I was really taken with one aspect of it that reminded me of Fellini. One of the commonalities between A Nightmare on Elm Street and Fellini's 8½ was Wes was playing with reality. Are we in a dream? So in a way, Wes was doing what Fellini was doing, which is manipulating the audience by sucking them into a situation they think is reality, and then they discover it's a subjective experience. The budget was very, very small, and there was a music supervisor who was working with me who disappeared with a piece of the budget.
He was involved in a fatal car accident, and he skipped town with our money.
And I thought, well, maybe I can stick my neck out here and do some really interesting and odd things. So that was part of my approach. I felt a little emboldened by the fact that maybe we were dealing with a picture here that might not see the light of day. I bought a TAC 8-track tape recording machine for the film, got it out of the box, set it up in this studio. At the time I did A Nightmare on Elm Street, it was not common to work in a home studio. It was, what, 1982, 83, somewhere in there. I was very aware that I wanted to have pop elements and still honor everything else. There's a religious element in there. There's a lot of, dream elements and spiritual elements, and so I tried to get all those bases, but I didn't want to ignore that kind of a little bit crude, a little bit crass, slightly rock and roll touch. I went on to work with Wes on a movie called Deadly Friend. So I was more or less working with Wes at that point as opposed to working for the series.
Well, Charles Bernstein, I think of all the composers I've had, as far as hitting something that could be repeated musically throughout the film and evoke this sense of weirdness and dread and everything else, his which was set to this little nursery rhyme that I had written, but I had no idea of how that could be set to music, just captured the film.
For anyone who was interested in scoring films and who happened to have gotten typecasted in doing horror films, as I had, getting the opportunity to do Nightmare 2 was a dream come true. And it was like the horror film. What makes the Nightmare series in terms of music unique from the other biggies of that period, which were Halloween and Friday the 13th, in both of those instances, they used the same composer. Halloween, of course, John Carpenter provided the music, was the director, and they maintained that theme throughout all of the movies. Friday the 13th films, which were scored by Harry Manfredini, you do and everyone immediately knows what that is. Unfortunately, with the Nightmare movies, every subsequent film, they brought in a different composer and encouraged him to do something entirely different than his predecessor. So what you have is a series of films in which there is really no continuity whatsoever in the music, which is kind of too bad, I think actually more than kind of too bad, it's very too bad. I remember when I got the job, it was with the understanding that I would do an orchestra score. So I remember I was like really into humpback whale sounds. So if you listen to the score, you're going to hear on occasion this, I look at the score and I think of it as an experiment of sorts to prepare me for the next horror film I did, which was Hellraiser. I look back on that opportunity that was offered me and I go, how blessed I was that they chose me. There were tens of thousands of composers who would have given their right leg to have gotten that job. And so for me at the time, I'd just gotten out of UCLA and I'd done a bunch of low budget features that were indies. This was my first real, honest to goodness, name feature. In short, I can only thank everyone involved that got me on board to be there. Jack, Bob, and Sarah for giving me an opportunity which indeed changed my life.
Whenever we brought different writers in for the scripts, when they failed, it was because they weren't writing Nightmare on Elm Street, they were writing something else. The same with composers. Like we did a score for Nightmare 3 that Angelo Badalamenti did. Angelo Badalamenti had done Blue Velvet before, and obviously it was a brilliant score, so Chuck, who was always looking to change things up, We were excited that we got him, but he delivered a score that wasn't Nightmare on Elm Street at all. We ended up having to pull all the stuff. They didn't use the Nightmare theme, you know, and it was like, you can't make Jaws without the Jaws theme. I know you want to create your own, put your own signature on it, but it has to start from what we know works. So, and that works when you're doing David Lynch. It didn't work for Nightmare. I mean, I know that we wanted something metal, but I can't remember the specifics of Dokken.
Yeah, actually, our management, Cliff Bernstein, was good friends with Wes Craven.
Yeah. Could have been anybody.
Happy accident.
I'm sure if our manager didn't know Wes,
Right.
you know, and it wouldn't happen. So, well, we actually we couldn't come to terms on the song, so George and Jeff, I don't know if Mick was involved, they wrote a version. Cliff says, okay, you write a version, and I wrote a version. I still remember my version. They didn't make it. They took their version. Mine was Dream Warriors, we can be heroes inside of our dreams.
Which is exactly
Dream
why I didn't
Warriors.
get excited.
That's how it went, yeah. We can be anything. I remember I wrote this, my own version, and did it with Win. You don't remember that?
You had a much better version, and I will tell you that to your face right now. But actually,
It was a good version.
It was great,
But
and it pissed me off. So I got together with Jeff and I said, "Fuck this, we've got to fucking beat Don's version." And we got together
And wrote the one.
with a big baggie, and we fucking beat your version.
I mean, I think we're all grateful that we were involved and got to see a little piece of pop culture history. Right
Yeah,
there.
pop culture.
But I mean, we'll never really know to what degree it affected the band. I think it was pretty instrumental in, like you said, in breaking us big. So, yeah, grateful.
The way I got the job was that Bob Shea saw Remo Williams. He saw a screening of it and loved the music and said, who did that music? I want them to do the next Elm Street, which was sort of odd because Remo Williams was a huge, 120-piece orchestra, 20 or 30-piece Korean orchestra, and then a big synclavier element added to it. It was a very, very complicated score. And Elm Street is like just bare bones, electronic, a guy in the studio, all alone doing all the little notes and everything. I thought the music should be very, very colorful, like the character, and should be just full of energy. And I wanted to make the music so everybody could just dive in and have fun in every scene. So with Nightmare, what I did was each scene I found a different sound for. So you have the karate scene, which is pretty obvious. But then you have the girl into the cockroach scene. And so I would use a super low contrabass clarinet. And then I had the choirs for the church at the end. And each specific character had their own sound and their own color. And that was sort of what I brought to it myself. And then I sort of wrapped it all in a big horror music framework. It sounded almost like the old Phantom of the Opera thing. I tried to use a lot of big organ chords and sounds like that.
Tuesday was a singer as well, and I said to her, why don't you, try to write something for the movie?
Well, I didn't have anything, so I went to my partner, my writing partner, and I said, oh my God, we gotta write something for Freddy. Let's do like, a love song from Kristen to Freddy. Let's do that kind of a thing. We recorded it the next day, and then I drove it down to them.
She brought me the tape, and I listened to it, and I said, this is awesome, and I convinced the studio that should be the title song.
I had no idea until I was sitting in the seat that it was the title song. So when I was in the seat, I just, in the theater, I was like,
They used a lot of pop songs from that period. I had no say in what they were.
I remember having a huge fight with Bob over the music, over the Sinead O'Connor song. And it was brilliant. I mean, it was wonderful. And, but she was just starting to hit. And so they wanted $10,000 for it, and every other song was $5,000. And Bob just goes, we aren't paying for the song. So I go, well, I really think we should. And, now we're holding up the mix. So he takes me into the soundproof booth. And he's screaming at me, and I'm looking out through the soundproof booth, and I know that everybody's looking at Bob, just yelling and yelling and yelling at me about the extra $5,000 for the song. So then he slams the door out of the soundproof booth, and all the guys, everybody's like the mixer. You see everybody ready like this. And he goes, "What do you think, guys?" And they all go, "We think it's a good idea to keep the song." He goes, "Okay."
I did write a song for the end credits. I submitted it. I wrote it on spec, submitted it. I thought that it should be sort of a James Bond-like ballad. It's called The Worst Is Over. You can bet the worst is over. They went with Iggy Pop.
I had worked with Iggy on Cry Baby, and so I asked Iggy to do a song. And the cool thing about the song is that if you listen to the song, in the middle of it he says, "I don't really believe that Freddy's dead," or some line like that. So he completely negates the entire film in the middle of his song at the end, and we left it in.
Freddy's
I saw Iggy, a while ago, and he said he made more money off the rights to that song than almost anything he'd done. And he had, he'd basically just tossed it off in 5 minutes as a favor to me.
Well, JP, he had worked on several films, including a little television series we did, Nightmare Cafe, which is where I met him. He was an ex-rock and roller keyboard guy, very, very talented, and could write these beautiful melodic phrases.
Wes wanted to create these two separate realities that Heather existed in. There was the normal reality. So the music in those scenes was electronic. When we go into the nightmare sections, that's when we used orchestra, and exclusively that way. So when you hear orchestra, it's not real, but it is.
He was a wizard of electronica, so he could do a lot of these things on a keyboard and a computer in a way that sounded like we had a much bigger orchestra than we had.
Heather and some of the choir that we used in Los Angeles whispered these strange incantations. Charles Bernstein's theme is a part of the Nightmare on Elm Street series as Robert Englund's character Freddy Krueger. They're enmeshed. So to exclude that in a film where it's supposed to be the nightmare happening to the characters, then the nightmare should also happen to that theme.
Everybody remembers it. Anybody who's seen the film can sing that to you. And if you ask people to sing a phrase from the score of most films, they can't remember. I don't know. Music was kind of good, but I can't remember what it sounded like. But that one you could.